You're listening to The Observing Eye. Pirate radio for the mind. Coming at you fresh from the computer hell cabin.
Hello, you beautiful lot. It's Friday, the 21st of June, 2024, and you're listening to episode 70 of The Observing Eye, coming at you live from the computer hell cabin. Every week, we get psychological, philosophical, and all manner of introspective. I'm David, and this week we are looking at embracing our imperfections. Have you ever found yourself caught in the relentless pursuit of perfection? Maybe it's that nagging voice in your head that criticizes every minor mistake, or the overwhelming pressure to meet impossibly high standards. If so, you're certainly not alone. In a world that often glorifies flawlessness, many of us struggle with accepting our own imperfections. Today, we're going to delve deep into this topic, exploring why it's not only okay to be imperfect, but also how it can be profoundly liberating. I used to be a terrible perfectionist, in both work and personal endeavors. In my writing, I'd constantly rewrite and redraft and then start from the beginning again because it wasn't good enough. Endless cycles of stopping and starting and frustration and never finishing. In my work as a software engineer, my code had to be perfect. I couldn't accept flaws or small issues in performance. Woe betide me if I inherited a project from someone else that didn't meet my lofty ideals. Letting go of that perfection was the best thing that I ever did. It's allowed me to do this podcast, to write a book, and to accept that I am just a fallible person on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. Of course, this wouldn't be The Observing Eye if we didn't offer some practical strategies for you to implement in your own life. We'll explore some tools that you can use to start embracing your own imperfections later in this episode. And of course, I want to hear from you too. I'm inviting you to share your own stories and experiences with imperfection. What have you struggled with? How have you learned to accept and embrace your flaws? You can reach out to me on social media or through our website, and who knows, your story might be featured in a future episode. So, whether you're a perfectionist striving for impossible standards, someone who feels weighed down by their flaws, or simply curious about how to live a more authentic and fulfilling life, this episode is for you. It's time to let go of the myth of perfection and start celebrating our beautifully imperfect selves. Now, let's start by understanding what we mean when we talk about imperfection and how various philosophical traditions have approached this concept. Imperfection is often seen as a flaw or a deficit, something to be fixed or hidden. But is that really the whole story? To begin, let's define what we mean by imperfection. Imperfection, in its simplest form, refers to the state of being incomplete or flawed. It's the idea that something or someone does not meet a certain standard of excellence or completeness. But this definition only scratches the surface. In our daily lives, imperfection can manifest in many ways. Maybe it's a project at work that didn't go as planned, a relationship that has its ups and downs, or even our own personal traits and habits that we wish were different. The societal pressure to appear flawless can make these imperfections feel like glaring failures. But what if we shifted our perspective and saw these imperfections not as deficits, but as natural and even valuable parts of the human experience? Let's take a step back for a minute and explore how ancient philosophers understood imperfection. The Greeks, for instance, had a nuanced view of human flaws and virtues, as you can probably tell if you've read any Greek mythology whatsoever. Aristotle, one of the most influential philosophers in Western thought, introduced the concept of, and I bring this up a lot because it's relevant in a lot of things we talk about, the concept of Eudaimonia, which is often translated as flourishing or the good life. Aristotle believed that achieving eudaimonia wasn't about being perfect. It was about living a life of virtue, of finding balance and striving towards our potential. Aristotle's idea of the golden mean is particularly relevant in this instance. He proposed that virtue lies in finding a balance between deficiency and excess. For example, courage is a virtue that lies between the extremes of recklessness and cowardice. This principle acknowledges that being human involves navigating these extremes and that imperfection is an inherent part of this process. Aristotle's philosophy suggests that our imperfections can guide us towards personal growth and balance, rather than being obstacles to overcome. Buddhism gives us some interesting perspectives on imperfection through its teachings on impermanence and suffering, or dukkha as it's called. According to Buddhist philosophy, life is inherently imperfect and full of suffering because everything is constantly changing. This impermanence means that nothing in life can ever be perfect, permanent, or completely satisfying. Buddhist teachings encourage us to accept this reality rather than resist it. By embracing the impermanent and imperfect nature of life, we can reduce our suffering and find some sort of peace amidst the chaos. This acceptance should not be confused with resignation, but rather a deeper understanding of the nature of reality. It's about letting go of the futile pursuit of perfection and instead cultivating a state of mindfulness and compassion towards ourselves and others. This moves me nicely on to another Buddhist idea, which is the practice of metta, or loving kindness meditation. This practice involves directing kind and compassionate thoughts and intentions towards ourselves and towards others, acknowledging our shared imperfections and the common humanity that binds us. Through metta, we learn to be gentle with ourselves, recognizing that imperfection is not only inevitable, but also a unifying human experience. Another Eastern philosophy called Taoism gives us yet more interesting insights into this idea around imperfection. So central to the Taoist thought is this idea of wu wei, which is often translated as non-action or effortless action. Wu wei doesn't mean nothing. It means aligning ourselves with the natural flow of life, acting in harmony with the Tao, or the fundamental nature of the universe. It's no surprise when we think about it, is it, that if we go up against the natural state of the universe, that we are not going to be the ones who win. Taoism teaches that there is beauty and wisdom in the natural world's imperfections. The Taoist sage, the founder of Taoism, Lao Tzu, famously said, and you'll have heard this quote, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." This reminds us that progress is incremental, and that each step, no matter how imperfect, is part of a larger journey. Taoism invites us to embrace our imperfections as part of our unique path, and to find strength in the natural, unforced flow of our lives. These differing philosophical perspectives, they all challenge the modern, often superficial quest for flawlessness, and encourage us to see our imperfections as intrinsic and valuable aspects of our existence. By viewing imperfection through this sort of lens, we can begin to appreciate the more meaningful role that our flaws play in shaping who we are and how we relate to the world around us. So what can we take away from these philosophical ideas? Well, firstly, imperfection is an inherent part of the human condition. Whether through Aristotle's idea of balanced virtues, Buddhism's acceptance of impermanence, or Taoism's alignment with the natural flow, we see that imperfection is not something to be eradicated but embraced. It's a reminder that we are all on a journey, each with our own unique struggles and unique strengths. By accepting our imperfections, we open ourselves up to a more authentic and fulfilling way of living. We can let go of the impossible standards that society often imposes on us, that we often impose upon us, and instead focus on what truly matters. That's our growth and our connections with others. And now, a word from our sponsor. Now, a few episodes ago, I did say repeatedly that there would never be a sponsor because I felt that it would impinge upon the artistic authenticity of this content, but I lied. There is a sponsor, but that sponsor is me, so I feel that that's an acceptable hypocrisy for me to be able to take there. And what I'm sponsoring this podcast with is my new book, which is out now on Amazon. You can buy it on the Kindle and as a paperback, and it's called The Observing Eye, a guide to living a more authentic life. And it's priced at £9.99 on paperback, in paperback, and £5.99 on the Kindle. I'll get those different connectors right eventually. Those linguistic connectors. So you can buy it. And the book is a supplement to the podcast. It goes in depth into a lot of the content that we talk about. And the idea is that it's trying to help you let go of the shackles of the prison of your ego, those mental constructs that we all create that we think are a good idea at the time, but very often shackle us to an inauthentic way of behaving and an inauthentic way of living. So that book is a guide to coax you out of that, hopefully, give you some ideas and some strategies that you could employ to connect with your true values, essentially, with some philosophy and stuff thrown in, because, I love philosophy. Obviously. So that's out now, and you can purchase it at your leisure from Amazon in whatever region you're in. I believe, apart from North Korea, it's not available in North Korea. So yeah, go out there and purchase a copy, please, and I will love you forever. And that's it. That's the end of this sponsor section. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I really need to sort out having that sponsor section as just a pre-recorded thing that I use every week rather than making a new one every episode, but it's kind of fun. So we'll see how that pans out in future. Now, let's move on to psychology. We're going to look at the psychological aspects of imperfection and how modern psychology can help us to understand and embrace our flaws. Perfectionism is a common struggle in today's society, where social media and cultural norms often promote an unrealistic image of flawless living. But what is perfectionism and how does it impact our mental health? Perfectionism is the tendency to set excessively high standards for ourselves and to strive for flawlessness. It's accompanied by critical self-evaluations and concerns about others' evaluations. So it's basically judgment from others, essentially. On the surface, this might seem like a positive trait, and that's the trick. After all, striving for excellence can lead to high achievements. However, the darker side of perfectionism can lead to a host of psychological issues. Research has shown that perfectionism is linked to a variety of mental health problems, including anxiety, depression, and burnout. When we set unrealistically, are we playing that? Are we playing word bingo? Are we playing word salad bingo this week? Because there's 3 there already. When we set unrealistically high standards, we set ourselves up for failure because these standards are often unattainable. The constant self-criticism and fear of making mistakes can create a cycle of stress and self-doubt, ultimately harming our sense of well-being. To understand this better, let's have a look at the work of Carl Rogers, who is one of my favorite modern psychiatrists, psychologists, and was a pioneer in the field of humanistic psychology. Rogers introduced the concept of unconditional positive regard, which is the idea that individuals should be accepted and valued for who they are, regardless of their flaws and imperfections. Now, he was coming at that from a therapist-client perspective, but it extends outwards to ourselves and to how we treat everyone around us. If everybody treated everyone else with unconditional positive regard, then it would be a very nice society to live in. He argued that many of our psychological issues stem from a lack of self-acceptance. When we internalize the belief that we must be perfect to be worthy of love and respect, we deny our true selves and create a fragmented sense of identity, which goes on to lead to feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem. Unconditional positive regard, on the other hand, promotes self-acceptance and helps individuals develop a cohesive and authentic sense of self. By accepting ourselves as we are, imperfections and all, we create a foundation for good mental health. But how do we move from a place of perfectionism to one of self-acceptance? One effective approach is through cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. I'm sure you've come across that in your travels before. So CBT is a form of psychotherapy that focuses on identifying and challenging negative thought patterns and behaviors. It's particularly useful for addressing perfectionism because it helps individuals recognize the unrealistic standards that they've set for themselves and develop healthier, more realistic ways of thinking. One powerful CBT technique for combating perfectionism is cognitive restructuring. So this involves identifying perfectionistic thoughts such as I must never make mistakes, or if I'm not perfect, I'm a failure, and challenging them with more balanced and realistic thoughts. For example, you might replace I must never make mistakes with everyone makes mistakes and they're an opportunity to learn and grow. There's a question, isn't there, that I'm not going to dive into too much in this episode, but I'll invite you to think about it as to what is the cause for that. Why do we think if I'm not perfect, I'm a failure? Why do we think I must never make mistakes? Now, my answer to that is very often it's drummed into us by what we would deem to be figures of authority when we're children, so parents and teachers. And that's conditional positive regard. That's I will give you love if you meet my requirements, my criteria, which is not to make a mistake. And that's shit. So don't do that to your kids. Another helpful technique is something called exposure therapy, where individuals gradually expose themselves to situations where they might make mistakes or be imperfect and learn to tolerate the resulting anxiety. Over time, this helps reduce the fear of imperfection and build up resilience within ourselves. Of course, I really had to bite my tongue there for a minute around exposure therapy because my mind immediately went to a man in a trench coat in a park at night, and that's not what this is about. So we're just gonna park that. We're gonna park that now. So coming back to our ideas of, I've gone straight from flashing to Buddhism. Coming back to ideas in Buddhism around metta, about loving kindness, self-compassion is also a crucial component of overcoming perfectionism. Now, the idea was developed by Dr. Kristen Neff, but obviously self-compassion has been a thing since anyone can remember. But of course, it involves treating ourselves with kindness, the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a friend. And it has three main components: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-kindness means being gentle with ourselves when we fail or make mistakes, rather than being harshly self-critical. Common humanity involves recognizing that imperfection is part of the human experience and that we are not alone in our struggles. Mindfulness involves being present with our experiences without judgment, acknowledging our thoughts and feelings without becoming overwhelmed by them. Practicing self-compassion can significantly reduce the negative effects of perfectionism. When we treat ourselves with kindness and understanding, we create a supportive inner environment that just kind of gives us a safe space to build up some resilience and to accept our failings. Okay, so practical strategy time then. What can we do to try and embrace our imperfections? Things that we can actually start doing as soon as you've listened to this, if you're feeling inclined. Now, we're going to start with meditation. I'm sure you're bored of me talking about meditation, but I'm going to keep talking about it until everybody does it, and that's it. So mindfulness meditation is becoming more aware of our thoughts, and it's kind of turning the lens of consciousness in on ourselves and observing what's going on internally. But what this does, it sounds very dramatic, but it's literally just sitting there and focusing on your breathing or something like that. So this helps to recognize patterns in our thinking. It helps us to observe and be aware of perfectionistic ideas. And by observing them, whilst not becoming them, we can gently steer our mind away from that and into a more accepting space. We've got journaling. There is this quote I bring up a few times, and it's the observer can't observe itself. And it's all very tricky to keep an eye on things, on our thinking, on our patterns of thinking when everything stays in our head. So writing stuff down allows us to reflect on our experiences, particularly moments where we felt pressured to be perfect. We can write about our feelings and challenge the unrealistic standards that we've set for ourselves. Over time, this practice can help to shift our mindsets because we're becoming aware of it. It's essentially, all of this stuff is just increasing our self-awareness. And we can't change anything unless we become aware of it. And I'd always say that like 90% of the battle is being aware that there's an issue with our thinking in the first place. Now, we've also got positive affirmations. I'm not such a huge fan of these, but I've thrown them in the mix because I know they certainly work for people. And affirmations can help us to counteract self-talk, negative self-talk, not just all self-talk, because that would be absurd. But, things like, I am enough just as I am, or mistakes are a part of growth. They can help to reinforce a more accepting attitude towards ourselves. And then, of course, there's setting realistic goals. If we break down large tasks into smaller, manageable chunks, then it makes everything feel a lot easier. If I just borrow from my software engineering profession, if someone came to me and said, I want you to build the Amazon shopfront, and that was one job, then I would likely diarrhea myself. But if someone said, I'd like you to break it down so that I just had to focus on building the shopping cart or building the product page or, building the login bit where you can go and add your details, then it becomes much more manageable. And I'm able to observe it in a much more constructive way because I'm just not drowning in this massive detail and terror, essentially. And then, of course, I'd always recommend this. Go and get some support, be that from people that you trust, not that weird dude down the pub, or a therapist, or a support group, or something where you can share your struggles and learn from others. Always good to see people as a mirror in which we can observe ourselves reflected back. And they can observe things that we can't necessarily see because, we're the observer observing itself. So that can be incredibly beneficial to raise the self-awareness, making us aware of the things that we're doing that we may not necessarily see in ourselves. So psychology, as always, can give us a wealth of tools and a depth of insight into helping us embrace our imperfections. By understanding the impact of perfectionism on our mental health and adopting strategies like cognitive restructuring, self-compassion, and mindfulness, we can slowly move towards a much more healthier and a much more accepting relationship with ourselves. Let's focus next on the benefits of embracing imperfection by looking at some real-life examples of how accepting our flaws can lead to personal growth, resilience, and authentic relationships. I'm going to begin with probably one of the most famous stories of successful imperfection, and that's Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before successfully inventing the light bulb. Each failure was a stepping stone, providing valuable lessons and insights into the process. Edison's persistence and willingness to embrace his imperfections ultimately led to one of the most significant inventions in history after the wheel and the printing press. His journey reminds us that mistakes are not just inevitable, but also essential for innovation and progress. When we accept our imperfections, we allow ourselves the freedom to experiment, to learn, and to grow. In the realm of sports, we can look at the career of Michael Jordan, widely regarded as one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Jordan has openly talked about his failures and setbacks, including being cut from his high school basketball team. Instead of letting these experiences define him negatively, he used them as motivation to improve. Jordan's career is a testament to the power of resilience. By embracing his imperfections and learning from his mistakes, he was able to achieve extraordinary success. This example highlights how accepting our flaws can build resilience, enabling us to bounce back from setbacks stronger than before. Embracing imperfection also plays a crucial role in our personal relationships. Brené Brown, a research professor and author known for her work on vulnerability and shame, emphasizes that embracing our imperfections is key to building trust and intimacy. Brown's research shows that when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and open about our flaws, we create deeper and more meaningful connections with others. This authenticity fosters trust and strengthens our relationships as people are drawn to those who are real and relatable. In the business world, consider the example of Sir Richard Branson, the founder of the Virgin Group. Branson has built his empire on a foundation of embracing failure and imperfection. He often speaks about his various business failures and how they have taught him valuable lessons. Branson's willingness to take risks and learn from his mistakes has been a driving force behind his success. His story underscores the importance of resilience and adaptability in the face of imperfection. Even in everyday life, embracing imperfection can lead to greater happiness and a sense of deep fulfillment. Think about the pressure many of us feel to present a perfect image on social media. Constantly striving for perfection can be exhausting and detrimental to our mental health. By embracing our imperfections and being more authentic, we can reduce this pressure and create more genuine connections. Sharing our true selves, including our struggles and flaws, can inspire and support others who are facing similar challenges. When we accept our flaws, we let go of the unrealistic standards and pressures that society imposes on us. This acceptance frees us from the constant need to compare ourselves to others and measure up to ideal images of perfection. Instead of focusing on what we lack, we can appreciate our unique strengths and qualities. This shift in perspective helps build self-esteem and just a general sense of contentment and comfortableness with ourselves. In essence, the power of accepting our flaws lies in the liberation it brings. It allows us to step off the treadmill of perfectionism and embrace a more genuine, fulfilling way of living. By recognizing and accepting our imperfections, we open the door to greater self-love, resilience, and deeper connections with the world around us. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say on the subject of embracing our imperfections. So, where do we go from here? Well, first, it's essential to remind ourselves that imperfection is not a flaw, but a fundamental aspect of being human. When we embrace this truth, we free ourselves from the burden of unrealistic expectations. We can begin to appreciate our unique qualities and experiences, recognizing that our imperfections contribute to our individuality. Embracing imperfection also involves a commitment to self-compassion. When we make mistakes or face setbacks, instead of harsh self-criticism, we can practice kindness and understanding towards ourselves. By treating ourselves with the same compassion we would offer a friend, we can build a more supportive and nurturing inner dialogue. Another practical step is to reframe our perspective on failure. Instead of viewing failures as definitive judgments of our worth, we can see them as valuable learning opportunities. Each mistake is a chance to grow and improve. This shift in mindset helps us to approach challenges with a sense of curiosity and resilience rather than fear and trepidation. In our relationships, embracing imperfection means being open and authentic with others. By sharing our true selves, including our flaws and vulnerabilities, we create connections based on trust and empathy. We create an environment where others feel safe to be themselves. strengthening our bonds, and enhancing our relationships. As we move forward, let's also remember the importance of setting realistic goals. By breaking down large tasks into smaller, manageable steps, we can reduce the pressure to be perfect and celebrate our progress along the way. This approach not only makes goals feel more attainable, but also reinforces a positive and motivating mindset. Finally, let's cultivate a practice of gratitude. By focusing on what we're grateful for, including our strengths and achievements, we can shift our attention away from perceived flaws and towards the positive aspects of our lives. Gratitude helps us appreciate the present moment and recognize the beauty in our imperfections. As we wrap up today's episode, I encourage you to take these insights and practices to heart. Embracing our imperfections is a journey, not a destination. It's about recognizing that we are all perfectly imperfect and that our flaws are not weaknesses, but integral parts of our humanity. As always, I want to thank all of you for joining me on this exploration of imperfection today. I hope you found the discussion useful, empowering, and somewhat insightful. If anything in this episode has resonated with you in any way, then I would love to hear from you. You can share your stories via Substack at theobservingeye.com or on social media. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@theobservingeye and on TikTok and Instagram with the handle @theobservingeye as well. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.
You've been listening to The Observing Eye. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope it's been useful. And if you're interested in any more of my writing or work around psychology, philosophy, and general day-to-day living, please go and take a look at my Substack, which is theobservingeye.com. And that's I as in the letter, not I as in the gelatinous organ through which you see. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.